Samuel 14. A day or so later, Prince Jonathan said to his young bodyguard, "Come, let's cross the valley to the garrison of the Philistines." But he didn't tell his father that he was leaving. Saul and his 600 men were camped at the edge of Gabi, around the pomegranate tree of Magron. Among his men, Eliah, the priest, the son of Ashtab, Ishbab's brother. Ahitub was the grandson of Phinehas, and the great-grandson of Eli, the priest of the Lord in Shiloh. So the meaning of a pomegranate as a symbol of peace, a fig tree. Figs and pomegranate fruits are somewhat similar. I say that hesitantly because fruit changes quite rapidly, but the point is, compared to a mustard seed, which is small and makes a strong single trunk, the fig tree is a packet of seeds. Each one of them is exactly identical to the other, and they're put in this pod together and planted as one. And when the tree grows, no one points and says, "Oh, well, that seed is the one who took credit over that one." No, 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 no. They all have this shared identity, And that's why it's a symbol of peace. It's like we're going to come together, dissolve our differences as one. And the fruit that bears from it will be all of our one credit. And oppose that to the mustard seed again, which is just the single seed. There's also a bit of it that's about like coarse screening. So, because normally you get rid of redundancies. No one realized that Jonathan had gone. To reach the Philistine garrison, Jonathan had to go over a narrow pass between two rocky crags which had been named Bozos and Chennai. The crag on the north was the front of Mishmash, and the southern was the front of Gaba. "Yes, let's go and cross to the heathen," Jonathan said to his bodyguard. "Perhaps the Lord will do a miracle for us, for it'll make no difference to him how many enemy troops there are." "Perhaps the Lord will do a miracle for us, for it makes no difference to him how many enemy troops there are." "Fine," the youth replied. "Do as you think is best. I am with you, heart and soul, whatever you decide." "All right, then this is what we'll do," Jonathan told him. "When they see us, if they say, 'Stay where you are, we'll kill you,' then we'll stop and wait for them. But if they say, 'Come on and fight,' then we'll do just that. For it will be God's signal that will help us defeat them." When the Philistines saw them coming, they shouted, "Look, the Israelis are crawling out of their holes." Then they shouted to Jonathan, "Come on up here, and we'll show you how to fight." "Come on, climb right behind me," Jonathan exclaimed to his bodyguard. "For the Lord will help us defeat them." So they clambered up onto their hands and knees, and the Philistines fell right back as Jonathan laid them and killed them right and left. About 20 of them, men in all, and their bodies were scattered all about the acre of the land. Suddenly, panic broke out through the entire Philistine army, even among the raiders. And just as there was a great earthquake increasing in the terror, Saul's lookouts at Gibeah saw a strange sight. The vast army of the Philistines began to melt away in all directions. Find out who isn't here, Saul ordered. And when they had checked, they had found that Jonathan and his bodyguard were gone. Bring the ark of God, Saul shouted to Eliah, for the ark was among the people of Israel at that time. But while Saul was talking to the priest, the shouting of the tumult in the camp of the Philistines grew louder and louder. Quick, what does God say? Saul demanded. Then Saul and his 600 men rushed into battle and found the Philistines killing each other. There were terrible confusion everywhere, and now the Hebrews had been drafted into the Philistine army, revolted, and joined with the other Israelis. Finally, even the men hiding in the hills joined the chase when they saw the Philistines running away. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle continued beyond Beth-Haven. Saul declared, "A curse upon anyone who eats anything before evening, before I have full revenge on my enemies." So no one ate anything all day. Even the ground that found the honeycomb on the ground in the forest, for they all feared Saul's curse. But Jonathan, however, had not heard his father's call. So he dipped a stick into the honeycomb, and when he needed the honey he had left, he felt much better. Then he told that his father had laid a curse upon anyone. Then someone told him that his father had laid a curse upon anyone who had ate food that day, and everyone was weary and faint as a result. "That's ridiculous," Jonathan exclaimed, "because he already went through the hole, you see. He's already in the other land. He went to that small red hole in Jericho, and on the other side found that kingdom of heaven. I get it." "That's ridiculous," Jonathan exclaimed. "A command like that only hurts us. See how much better I feel that I've eaten this little bit of honey. If the people had been allowed to eat fruit freely from the food they had found among our enemies, think how many more we could have slaughtered. But, hungry as they were, they chased and killed the Philistines all day, from Mishmash to Eliad, growing more and more faint. That evening, they flew upon the spoils of battle and butchered the sheep, oxen, and calves, and ate the raw, bloody meat. Someone reported that Saul was happening, that the people were sinning against the Lord by eating blood. Yea, they are still out of balance, in a time when they still fear the heat of the day and the cool of the night. Aye, for when God gave them honey in the wilderness, milk and honey of the heaven that they were to enjoy, they turned it down. But the first turn against the Lord's orders, eating a bloody fowl or meat, aye, they did it. That's the Lord's law. The understanding is that you must go through a process of purification to be with Jonathan in heaven like the rest of them. Jonathan went through that with his devotion of God. He let go of his whole life and put it in the hands of the Lord, like that good son of Abraham did all those years ago. So, while these people are doing an artificial sacrifice, they didn't walk with actual God, as that seed that Saul planted from the beginning, you understand? Do you remember how we talked about when he was going up to the chapel to give up his life? How he initially came for the cost of money, against his father Eli, and against his son David. Aye, for those are of his line, for Saul has a branch all to himself. Just as he had wanted. Yea. So, They could not hold that heavy, slavish yoke that Saul put on them. Do not follow God's law. You know, he produced some nonsense out of his ass. As he did when he burned the sacrifice before the good Samuel could come and join him. Sorry, not Eli. I meant to say Samuel. Before he could come join them, he was in a rush for things for himself. To defeat the Philistines, terrified as he was, with no faith in the Lord. Even his own physical father that he could see. Sorry, how should I say that? A picture of his son, you know, and still he had no faith. But Jonathan, I should know his mother properly. I guess I must have. For he is a good soul. I understand. So, oh, that is very wrong, Saul said. Roll a great stone over here, and go out among the troops, and tell them to bring the oxen and sheep here, to kill them and drain them, not to sin against the Lord by eating blood. So, that is what they did. And Saul built an altar unto the Lord, his very first. Afterwards, Saul said, Let's chase the Philistines all night and destroy every last one of them. Fine, the men replied. Do as you think is best. But the priest said, Let's ask God first. So Saul asked God, Shall we go after the Philistines? Will you help us defeat them? But the Lord made no reply all night. Then Saul said to the leaders, Something is wrong. We must find out what sin was committed today. I vow by the name of God who saved Israel that though the sinner may be my own son Jonathan, he shall surely die. But no one would tell him what was the trouble. Then Saul proposed, Jonathan will stand over here, and all you stand over there. And the people agreed. So, real quick here, there's a play about what will be brother to Jonathan, David, revealing what Jonathan is. Because Saul is an unrighteous king, it seems like Jonathan is unholy. Unholy? It seems as though Jonathan had transgressed. O Lord God of Israel, why haven't you answered my question? What is wrong? Are Jonathan and I guilty? Or is the sin among the others? O Lord God, show us who is guilty. And Jonathan and Saul were chosen by a sacred lot of guilty ones, and the people declared innocent. Then Saul said, Now draw lots between me and Jonathan. And Jonathan was chosen as the guilty one. Aye. Now tell me what ye've done, son. Saul demanded of Jonathan. Hey, I had tasted a little bit of honey in the forest, Jonathan admitted. It's only a little bit, and at the end of a stick. But, as you said it, now I must die. Yes, Jonathan, you must die. May God strike me dead if you are not executed for this. But the troops retorted, Jonathan, who saved Israel today, shall die? Far from it. We vow by the life of God that not one hair on his head will be touched, for he has been chosen by God to do a mighty miracle today. So the people rescued Jonathan. Then Saul called back to the army, and the Philistines returned home. And now, since he was secretly in the saddle of the king of Israel, Saul sent the Israeli army out in every direction of Moab against. Wait. And since now he was securely in the saddle as the king, I was about to say, that makes sense. As king of Israel, Saul sent the Israeli army out in every direction in Moab. Army. I. For you don't display yourself wide nakedly when you think your enemies are pointed against you. If you're Saul, at least, you think you're a coward. Wherever he turned, he was successful. He did great deeds and conquered the Amalekites and saved Israel from all those who'd been their conquerors. Saul had 3 sons. Saul had 3 sons, Jonathan, Ishvi, and Malchusha, and 2 daughters, Merab and Michal. Saul's wife was Onanam, the daughter of Amaz, and the general-in-chief of his army was his cousin Abner, his uncle Ner's son. Abner's father, Ner, Saul's father, Kish, were brothers. Both were the sons of Abel. Abiel, not Abel, Abiel. The Israelis fought constantly with the Philistines throughout Saul's lifetime. And whenever Saul saw any brave, strong young men, he conscripted him into his own army. One day, Samuel, his father, religious father, said to Saul, I crowned thee as king because God told me to now. So he told me to. Now, be sure that ye obey him. Here is his commandments. I have decided to settle the accounts with the nations of Amalek, refusing to allow my people to cross their territory when Israel came from Egypt. Now, go and completely destroy the entire Amalek nation. Men, women, their children, babies, the oxen, sheep, camels, and donkeys. All of it. For Amalek was declared the source, the seed of evil by our Lord God. That was the name he gave us to give unto him. So, we will throw the entire lot into the fire. So Saul mobilized his army in Telaim. There were 200,000 troops in addition to 10,000 men from Judah. The Amalekites were camped in the valley below them. Saul sent a message to the Kenites, telling them to get out from among the Amalekites, or else they shall die with them. For you were kind to the people of Israel when they came out of the land of Egypt, he exclaimed. So the Kenites packed up and left. Then Saul butchered the Amalekites from Havilah all the way up to Shur, east of Egypt. He captured their leader, Agag, the king of the Amalekites, but killed everyone else. However, Saul and his men kept the best sheep and the oxen and the fattest lambs. Everything, in fact, that appealed to them. You don't understand what's happening here. This would be like, what does this be like? That's not a historical example. Well, the keeping of the Amalek is the same thing as the keeping of the choicest seeds of the oxen and sheep that they just spoke about. It's like Well, now that these things don't have a body, we can contain their power. And perhaps then we could digest them, and we could attain it. Aye, this is what it reminds me of. It reminds me of the swallowing of Operation Paperclip and the eugenic, psychological warfare, anti-freedom nonsense that came from that. Why am I talking about conspiracies like that? But it's like, hey, well, now that the Nazis aren't a war threat, we have all these leaders. We have all that power. We can take it into ourselves, and that won't change our character, no. No, it'll cause you to die. I. What's up, brother? Are you? Um, the reason why it kills you has something to do with informational weight. And informational weight has something to do with patience and time, basically. So, you don't eat unripe fruit. Hmm. They kept everything, in fact, that appealed to them. They destroyed only what was worthless or of poor quality. Then the Lord said to Samuel, I'm sorry that I ever made Saul king, for he again refused to obey me. Samuel was deeply moved when he heard what God was saying, and he cried to the Lord all night. Early in the next morning, he went out to find Saul. Someone said that he'd gone to Mount Carmel to erect a monument to himself, and he had gone on to Gaggle. When Samuel finally found him, Saul greeted him cheerfully. Hello there, he said. Well, I've carried out the Lord's command, my father. Then, what was all that bleating of the sheep and oxen I heard coming into the camp? It is true that the army spared the best sheep and the oxen, but we're going to sacrifice them unto your Lord God, Samuel. We have destroyed everything else. Stop. Listen to what the Lord told me last night. Go on. When you didn't think much of yourself, God made you king of Israel, and he sent you on an errand and told you, go and completely destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, until they are all dead. That was the deed he gave unto ye, not to wage a war and slaughter and kill for the glory of Israel. It was to extinguish them. Do you know why the Lord gives his commandments? Why did you rush for the loot and do exactly what God said not to do? But I've obeyed the Lord. I did what he told me and brought King Agag, but killed everyone else. It was only when my troops demanded that I let them keep the best sheep and the best oxen and loot. It was because they loathed the Lord so much for a sacrifice. Saul, Samuel, Samuel replied, "Has the Lord much pleasure in your burnt offerings and sacrifices as in your obedience? I, Saul, obedience is far better than sacrifice. He is much more interested in your listening to him than you offering the fat of rams for him to him. I. Do you understand what it means to be in the body of the Lord? Son, first and foremost, from your heart. I, yes, I know we are followers of the law, but we are sons of Abraham and Moses. Understand?" He is much more interested in your listening to him than in your offerings in the fat of rams. For rebellion is as bad as a sin, as witchcraft, stubbornness is as bad as worshipping idols. And now, because ye have rejected what the word of Jehovah said, he has rejected you from being king. So, I have sinned. I have disobeyed your instructions at the command of the Lord. For I was afraid of the people if I didn't do what they demanded. Oh, please pardon my sin now and go with me to worship the Lord. It's no use, since you have rejected the commandment of the Lord. He has rejected you from being the king of Israel. There will be another Saul. As Samuel turned to go, Saul grabbed him to try to hold him back and tore at his robe. And Samuel told him, "See, the Lord has torn the kingdom from Israel from you today, and has given to the country of man of yours who is better than you are. Excuse me, and has given it to a countryman of yours who is better than ye, and who is the glory of Israel, not lying, nor will he change his mind, for he is not a man. And he who is the glory of Israel is not lying, nor will he change his mind, for he is not a man." Then Saul pleaded again, "I've sinned, but at least honor me before the leaders, before my people, by going with me to the worship, Lord." "All right." Then Samuel said, "Bring King Agag to me." Agag arrived, full of smiles, for he thought, "Surely the worst is over and I have been spared." But Samuel said, "Has your sword killed the sons of many mothers? Now your mother shall be childless." And Samuel chopped him into pieces before the Lord of Gilgal. Then Samuel went home to Ramah, and Saul returned to Geba. Samuel never saw Saul again, but he mourned constantly for him, and the Lord was sorry that he ever made Saul king of Israel. That's such a good scene. You can see that, right? You can see the silhouette. And he raises up his sword and does what is right. That smiling bastard. You know. Saul, Samuel, is an older man at this point, you know. He kind of comes in and does his job and leaves properly. Just as the Lord has, you know. Not all the sheep, he can't call the fucking sheep and all that and not take back the loot. But he's one man. And Saul had an army and didn't do that much. So Finally, the Lord said to Samuel, "You have mourned long enough for Saul, for I have rejected him of king of Israel. Now take a vial of olive oil and go to Bethlehem and find a man named Jesse, for I have selected one of his sons to be the new king." Samuel asked, "How can I do that? If Saul hears about it, he will kill me, father." "Take a heifer with you," the Lord replied, "and say that you have come to make a sacrifice to the Lord. Then call Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you which of his sons is to be anointed." So Samuel did as the Lord told him. When he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the city came trembling to meet him. "What's wrong?" they asked. "Why have ye come?" He replied, "All is well. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Purify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice, please." And he performed the purification rite on Jesse and his sons, and invited them too. When they arrived, Samuel took a look at Eliab and thought, "Oh, surely that is the boy that the Lord has chosen." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Don't judge a man by his face or height, for this is not the one. I don't make decisions the way you do. Men judge by outward appearance, but I look at a man's thoughts and intentions." Then Jesse told his son, Abinab, to step forward and walk in front of Samuel. But the Lord said, that is not the right man either." Next, Jesse summoned Shammah, but the Lord said, "No, not this one." In the same way, all 7 of his sons presented themselves to Samuel, and all were rejected. The Lord had not chosen any of them. Samuel told Jesse, "Are these all there are?" "Well, I have a youngest son," Jesse replied, "but he's out in the fields watching the sheep." "Send for him at once, for we will not sit down and eat until he arrives." "All right." So Jesse sent for him. He was a fine-looking boy, a ruddy face with pleasant eyes, a long, thin, elegant body. The Lord said, "This is the one. Anoint him." And Samuel said, "The one that looks like a girl?" And the Lord said, "Yes, that one." So David stood there among his brothers. Samuel took olive oil he had brought and poured it upon David's head, and the Spirit of Jehovah came upon him and gave him great powers that day, and from that day onward. Samuel then returned to Ramah, but the Spirit of the Lord had left Saul, and instead the Lord had sent a tormenting spirit that filled him with desperation and fear. Some of Saul's aides suggested a cure. "We'll find a good harpist to play for you whenever the tormenting spirit is bothering ye," they said. "The harp music will quiet ye, and soon I will be well again." "All right," Saul said. "Find me this harpist." One of them said he knew a young fellow in Bethlehem, the son of a man named Jesse, who was not only talented with the harp, but a handsome, brave, and strong, girlish young boy who had good solid judgment. "What's more," he added, "the Lord, God, is with him, they say." So Saul sent messengers to Jesse, asking that he send his son David, the shepherd. Jesse responded by sending not only David, but a young goat and a donkey carrying a load of food and wine, for Jesse was a very gracious, good servant to the king. From the instant he saw David, Saul admired and loved him, and David became his bodyguard. Then Saul wrote Jesse, "Please let David join my staff, for I am very fond of him." And whenever the tormenting spirit of God troubled Saul, David would play the harp, and Saul would feel much better, and the evil spirits would go far away. The Philistines now mustered their army for battle, camped between Succoth and Judah and Azekah in the Ephraim's Demim. Saul countered with a buildup of forces at the Uli Valley. So the Philistines and the Israelis faced each other on opposite sides of the hill, with the valley between them. Then Goliath, a champion of the Philistines from Gath, came out of the ranks to face the forces of Israel. He was a giant, a man measuring over 9 feet tall. He wore a bronze helmet, 200-pound coat mail, bronze leggings, and carried a long, bronze javelin like a light pole, several inches thick, tipped with 25 pounds of iron spearhead. And his armor-bearer walked ahead of him with a huge shield. He stood and shouted across the Israelis, "Do you need a whole army to settle this? I represent the Philistines in my body and flesh, and you choose someone to represent you, and we will settle this single combat. If your man is able to kill me, then I and all of us will be thy slaves. But if I cut off his head, then you must be ours. I defy the armies of Israel. Send me a man who will fight me." When Saul and the Israeli army heard this, they were dismayed, frightened, scattered. David, the son of the aging Jesse, a member of the tribe of Judah who lived in Bethlehem, had 7 older brothers. 3 eldest, Eliab, Abnab, and Shammah, had already volunteered for Saul's army to fight against the Philistines. But David was the youngest son, and on Saul's staff as a part-time basis. He went back and forth to Bethlehem to help his father with the sheep at times. For 40 days, twice a day, morning and evening, the Philistine giant strutted before the armies of Israel. Then, one day, Jesse said to David, "Take this bushel of roasted grain, these 10 loaves of bread to thy brothers. Give this cheese to thy captain, and see how the boys are getting along. Bring us back a letter from them. Please, my beloved David." Saul and the Israeli army were camped in the valley of Elah. So David left his sheep with another shepherd and took off early the next morning with their gifts. He arrived at the outskirts of the camp just as the Israeli army was leaving at the battlefield with the shouts of the battle cries. Soon, the Israeli and the Philistine forces stood facing each other, army against army. David left his luggage with the baggage officer and hurried over to the rakes to find his brothers. As he was talking with them, he saw the mighty Goliath, the giant, step out from the Philistine troops and again shout his challenge to the Israeli army. As soon as they saw him, they began to run away in fright. "Have you seen the giant Goliath?" the soldiers were asking. "He has insulted the entire army of Israel, the entire nation. And have you heard about the huge reward the king has offered to anyone who kills him? And the king will give any one of his daughters for a wife, and his whole family will be exempted from paying taxes. David talked to someone standing there to verify the report. What will the man get for killing this Philistine and ending the insults to Israel? He asked them. Who is this heathen Philistine anyway that is allowed to defy the armies of the living God? And he received the same reply as before. But when David's oldest brother, Eliab, heard David talking like that, he was angry. What are you doing around here anyway? He demanded. What about the sheep? You're supposed to be taking care of the fucking sheep. I know that cocky brat you are. Are you just here to see the fucking battle? I shouldn't curse so much, sorry. What have I done? He replied. I'm only asking questions. Why are you guys sitting here against that one guy when we have fucking God on our side, brother? And as he walked over to the others and asked them the same thing and received the same answer, when it was finally realized what David meant, someone told King Saul the king had sent him. And the king sent him. Don't worry about a thing, David told him. Oh, sorry, that's David's voice. Don't worry about a thing. I'll take care of this Philistine. Don't be ridiculous, David, Saul replied. How could a kid, a boy like you, defeat a man like that? You're only a boy, and he has been an army since he was a boy. But David persisted. When I am taking care of my father's sheep, a lion, a bear, anything, none can grab from my flock. I go after it with a club. I take the lamb from its mouth. If it turns on me, I catch it by the jaw, and I club that lion to death. I've done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do it to this heathen Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord saved me from the claws of the teeth of the lion and the bear, and will save me from this Philistine. Saul finally consented. All right, go ahead, and may the Lord be with thee. And Saul gave David his own armor, a bronze helmet, and a coat of mail. A decision Saul would ruminate on for many years. David praised it on, draped it on, strapped the sword over it, and took a step or two to see what it was like, and never worn such a thing before. I can hardly move, he exclaimed, and took it off again. Then he picked up 5 smooth stones from the stream and put them in his shepherd's bag, armed only with his Then he picked up 5 smooth stones from the stream and put them in the shepherd's bag, armed only with the shepherd's staff and sling, started across to Goliath. Goliath walked over towards David, with the shield bearer ahead of him, sneering at contempt with the nice little red-cheeked boy. Am I like a dog, he roared at David, that you come at me with a bloody stick? And he cursed David by the names of his gods. Come over here, and I will give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals, Goliath yelled. And David shouted in reply, You come to me with a sword and spear, but I come to you in the name of the Lord and the armies of the heaven and Israel, the very God to whom you have defied. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head, and and then I will give the dead bodies and then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. And Israel will learn that the Lord does not depend on weapons to fulfill his to fulfill his plans. He works without regard to human means. He will give you to us." As Goliath approached, David ran out to meet him. Reaching into his shepherd's bag, he took out a stone and hurled it from a swing right at the Philistine. Center. Black. Right in the forehead. Piercing his skull. Sank in. Deep. And that giant fell flat on his face to the ground. Since David had no sword, he ran over and pulled Goliath from its sheath and then cut off his head. And then he hefted the giant's head above his and showed it to the Philistines' army. Then the Israelis gave a great shout of triumph and rushed after the Philistines, chasing them far as Gath into the gates of Ekron. The bodies of the dead and the wounded Philistines were strewn out all along the road of Sharam. Then the Israeli army returned and plundered the deserted Philistine camp. Later, David took Goliath's head to Jerusalem, but stored his armor in his tent. As Saul was watching David go out to fight Goliath, he asked Abner, this general of his army, "Abner, what sort of family does this young fellow come from?" "I really don't know." "We'll find out. This David." After David killed Goliath, Abner brought him to Saul, with the Philistine head in his hand. "Tell me about your father, boy," Saul said. And David replied, "His name is Jesse. We live in Bethlehem." After King Saul had finished his conversation with David, David met Jonathan, the king's son, and there was an immediate bond of love between the two of them. Jonathan swore to be his blood brother and sealed the pact by giving him a robe, sword, bow, and belt. King Saul now kept David at Jerusalem and wouldn't let him return home anymore. He was Saul's special assistant, and he's always carried out his assignments successfully. Again, think about this like a king, collecting a bunch of different powers, even those that might have been barred by God. That was his way with Agag, It's like he's doing something similar. And like Agag, he couldn't take in the line of David. Alright. He sealed the pact by giving him his robe, sword, bow, and belt. King Saul now kept David at Jerusalem and wouldn't let him return home anymore. He was Saul's special assistant, and he always carried out his assignments successfully. So Saul made him commander of his troops, an appointment which was applauded by the army of the general public alike. But something had happened with the victorious Israeli army, which was returning home after David had killed Goliath. Women came out from the towns a long way to celebrate the cheering of the king's soul, and were singing and dancing for joy with tambourines and cymbals. However, this was not their song. Saul had slain thousands, and David 10,000s. Of course, Saul was very angry. "What's this?" he said to himself. "They credit David with 10,000 and me with only one. And me with only thousands. Next, they'll be making him their king." So from the time on, King Saul kept a jealous watch on David. The very next day, in fact, a tormenting spirit from God overwhelmed Saul, He began to rave like a madman. David began to soothe him by playing the harp as he did whenever this happened. But Saul, who was fiddling with the spear, suddenly hurled it at David, intending to pin him to the wall. But David jumped aside and escaped. This happened another time too, for Saul was afraid of the young David and jealous of him, because the Lord had left Saul and was now with David. Finally, he banned David from his presence and demoted him from the rank of captain. But the controversy put more David in the public than ever. David continued to succeed in everything he undertook. The Lord was with him. When King Saul saw this, he became even more afraid. But all of Israel and Judah loved him, for he was one of them. One day Saul said to David, I am ready to give you my oldest daughter Merab as thy wife. But first you must prove thyself to be a real soldier, fighting in the Lord's battles. For Saul thought to himself, I'll send him against the Philistines and let them kill him rather than doing it myself. Who am I that I should be the king's son-in-law? David exclaimed. My father is nothing. But when the time arrived for the wedding, Saul married her to Adriel, a man from Mathash, instead. In the meantime, Saul's daughter, Michal, had fallen in love with David, and Saul was delighted when he heard about it. Here's David's opportunity. Here's another opportunity to see him killed by the Philistines, Saul said to himself. But to David he said, you can be my son-in-law after all, for I will give you my youngest daughter. So you see this repeated pattern where David basically represents something like almost like relaxation. It's more like water, never force. Versus Saul is always like a corrupt, top-down thing that's always being chased by that thing. He's always holding it down, something like that. So, one of the examples, he artificially becomes king. They set up a sort of thing that sort of tricks him into believing that he is king. He wants it for initially money. They sort of use magic, in a sense. Magic in the sense of like hypnosis to prop everyone up and make people believe that God is with him, that he is like the prophets. It's a kind of a foolish thing that he does. He doesn't actually have faith with God. So when he kills the Philistine army, first of all, he has no faith. He's going to be destroyed. His belief in himself as something was based on the belief in the crowds. Something like he fears the crowds or something. He fears his own people. He fears his own son. That's happening. Because he wants to hold on. His son is always something that's against him. So we see him, he wants to marry off one of his daughters. But he has no intuition, he has no insight, because he's perfectly blinding himself. He's telling David that he needs to prove himself in battle in order to marry one of his daughters, even though he already proved himself furthest in battle than anyone else. And then, after he does it for him a second time, he doesn't meet his promise and marries off his daughter to someone else. But it doesn't matter, because David already had fallen in love with another one of his daughters. If Saul had been paying close attention and had been listening and been like David, he could have a son. don't know. And he could have married. He could have done his scheme properly. This is comical. Then Saul instructed his men to say confidently to David that the king really liked him a lot, and that they all loved him and thought he should accept the king's proposition and become his son-in-law. But David replied, "How can a poor man like me, from an unknown family, find enough dowry to marry the daughter of the king?" When Saul's men reported this back to him, he told them, "Tell David that the only dowry I need is 100 dead Philistines. Vengeance on my enemies is all I want." But what Saul had in mind was that David would be killed in this fight. Whoa. Wow, I see why that's so scandalous. David was delighted to accept the offer. So, before the time limit expired, he and his men went out and killed 200 Philistines and presented their foreskins to King Saul. So Saul gave Michal to him. When the king realized how much the Lord was with David, and how immensely popular he was with all the people, he became even more afraid of him, and grew to hate him even more with every passing day. Whenever the Philistine army attacked, David was more successful against them than all the rest of Saul's officers. So, David's name became very famous throughout the land. All right. I'm going to call that there. Oh, yeah. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy will be done. Thy kingdom come, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. And lead us not into temptation. Forgive us for our debts, as we forgive them who did against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy will be done. Thy kingdom come, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and lead us not into temptation. As we've, I messed it up. I messed up again.